2026, a new year which really has its work cut out to beat 2025. January is often the coldest month of the year, and a long way away from being the brightest. With daylight hours still short and the sun altitude still very low, it's never going to be one of the bigger months for solar generation. So with that said, let's see how my solar panels performed this month. I'm based in the UK, specifically in the West Midlands, just outside the city of Coventry. As you can see from the approximate coordinates, the UK is a long way into the Northern Hemisphere, meaning seasonal variation is significant. I'm fortunate enough to have a sizable system consisting of 32 panels across various orientations. That comprises of 16 south, 5 east, 5 west and 6 north facing. This makes just over 14 kilowatts of total capacity, or 12.6 after inverter limitations. The estimated output of the entire system is around 10,700 kilowatt hours. The system wasn't always this size, it's been built up over time in 3 phases. Here is a breakdown of each element. Phase 1 occupies the south facing side of the roof. It's just over 5 kilowatts peak and it was installed back in October 2023. It consists of 12 SunPower Maxion 3 430 watt panels, paired with solar edge optimizers and a 5 kilowatt solar edge inverter. Phase 2 is formed on the east and west aspects of the roof. It's 4.4 kilowatts peak, it was installed back in October 2024 and consists of 10 REA Fusion 2 440 watt panels, 5 on the east and 5 on the west. Each one is paired with an N-phase IQ8 HC microinverter. The final phase of the system occupies the garage and north side of the house. It was activated in May 2025 and consists of 10 REA Fusion 2 450 watt panels. There's 4 on the south side of the garage, 4 on the north side of the garage and 2 on the north side of the house. These also have N-phase IQ8 HC microinverters. Let's start with the south facing array. It produced 173 kilowatt hours for the month of January. That's up 11% on what turned out to be a fairly strong December. Things started out really well, with 4 of the first 10 days being sunny, if in some cases frosty and snowy, but it got me optimistic for the month to come. But by the midpoint, those days were massively outnumbered by the darker, wet and overcast ones. There were some mixed days throughout, but with 14 of the 31 days producing less than 2 kilowatt hours, things could have been better. Moving on to the east and west array, this one was still heavily shaded, but less so compared to December. As such, we were up 36% on December's total. That made 48.7 kilowatt hours throughout January, with the outer east-facing panels producing the strongest yield. It was a similar trend for the garage and north-facing panels, 31% up on last month as they are now marginally less shaded. The south garage panels in particular seeing a notable uplift. The total was 61.9 kilowatt hours for the month. Proportionately, it means the south array produced 61% of total generation, 22% came from the garage and north, with the east and west aspects making up just 17% of the total generation for the month of January. If you have enjoyed this so far, please give this video a like as it really helps me as a small channel. Many thanks. Let's look at the highest days of generation, starting with the south facing aspect. It was the 3rd of January, a very cold frosty morning, producing 16 kilowatt hours exactly in the end. With slightly extended daylight hours, it was 9% up on December's best. The peak being around 12:30 was 3.3 kilowatts. The highest generation for the east and west aspects resulted in 3.27 kilowatt hours, but not on the 3rd of January, as with the south facing aspect. It was actually the 28th of the month, which was a really mixed day, but the elevated sun altitude at the end of the month compared to the start meant only half a day's worth of sunshine was enough to outgenerate those sunny days at the start of the month. It just goes to show the extent of which the shade was gradually disappearing as the month went on. It was proven once again when on the 31st of the month another mixed day also outperformed the early sunny days of the month. It was largely a similar story for the garage and north facing aspects. Here we're looking at just over 4 kilowatt hours for the day, again on the 28th of January, a mixed day. But those garage mounted south facing panels were far less shaded, giving a better result. And that's what it's about where shade is concerned. We are past the winter solstice, meaning every day between now and June 21st has a higher sun and longer daylight hours. Little by little, shade will become less of a factor. More good news as far as lowest generation is concerned. On the 15th of January, the south-facing aspect only managed 453 watt-hours, but this was 420% up on December's worst, an encouraging sign that the darkest days are no longer as dark as they were in December. The other aspects also coped better on the darkest day, which again was the 15th of January, with the east and west sides producing 430 watt-hours and 504 for the garage and north-facing aspects, resulting in a total of just under 1.4 kilowatt-hours, which is a big improvement on December's gloomy lows. Did your system perform as you were hoping in January? Which were your highest and lowest performing days, and what are your expectations for 2026 in general? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments. Let's take a look at how we did versus targets. For the South Array, it's a mixed bag because we beat the PVWatts targets quite considerably by 64 kilowatt hours in fact, but we actually fell ever so slightly short of the installer targets who predicted a lofty 189 kilowatt hours. Overall, I would put it on the disappointing side of average. I say this because we're marginally down on 2024 and 2025's January totals, but feeling optimistic, there are some other observations you could make. Firstly, January is only worth around about 3% of the annual generation, so this month's performance is far less important compared to some of those mid-year months. Secondly, notice 2025 had a poor January and February for that matter. It then went on to become a record-breaking year, so a poor January needn't mean a disappointing year. You may have noticed I've changed the way these graphs are laid out for this year. I've got the line graphs representing the PV watts and installer targets in yellow and blue respectively. The actual results are now presented as bars in green, with the most recent the darkest tone. I thought it made sense considering the targets are constants and will be adding to the actual data year after year. Let me know if you prefer this one over the previous. For the east and west targets, we surpassed the PVWatts targets by 7.7 kilowatt hours, but the installer targets turned out to be considerably off with their shading calculations due to the shape of our roof, so can reasonably be ignored at this time of year. We have far less historic data from this aspect compared to the south, with it only being installed towards the end of 2024. But the January 2026 result is consistent with that of the south-facing aspect, down on last year's January, but not considerably so. The garage and north-facing aspects continue their 100% record from last year over PVWatts targets, this month 10 kilowatt hours up, but again down on installer targets, which interestingly enough for this aspect, both PVWatts and installer targets are nearly a perfect match over a full year. We don't have any data from any months prior to May, so it'll be interesting to see how these can do in the first half of the year. January gave us a collective 284 kilowatt hours generated. That's up on last year, not because it was a better month, but because it was bolstered by the additional garage and north-facing panels that weren't previously present at the start of 2025. We had a big month for usage. The cold weather meant the heat pump was consuming more than it ever had. It was roughly 500 kilowatt hours. We drove around about 1,500 miles in the cars in total, and we must have put on at least 25 loads of washing across January. As such, we imported nearly 1.1 megawatt hours and only exported a measly 48 kilowatt hours. We achieved savings of around about 144 in the month. It was never going to be a cheap month with that level of consumption. We're looking at a total bill of £87.69. The bulk of this thankfully came from the 7p off-peak import, with just 0.9 units coming from peak rate. I actually can't quite believe that we pulled that off. Quite fortunate there. Export only gave us £7.20, which only really made up for around about half the standing charge of a 31-day month. So roll on February. I would say that, but the weather forecast isn't currently looking so great. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more solar content, including a look back at what made 2025 so great for solar, along with many other aspects of my renewable energy journey. That's all for today. Hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.